Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, or sci-fi, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And once again, I am Robcasting it. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity Community. This is Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 629. I wanted to start by reminding everybody of something I always say, that I always think about in terms of the entertainment business, but it's pretty good to remember in all walks of life, no matter what your business is, and that is, of course, say it with me now, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And nowhere is that ever more important than in the cutthroat entertainment business, the business of Hollywood. God forbid you ever find yourself immersed here. Because let me tell you, Hollywood, on one hand, can be a great place. You can work with great people and create great things. But on the other hand, existing simultaneously with that is Mos Eisley Spaceport, a place where you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. This place can be a little rough. Watch your step. All of that, yes. So I wanted to start by reading to you a New York Times article. Now, back in 2019, Netflix, one of their most watched shows, was Friends. That's right, Friends. And, of course, with Warner Brothers starting up HBO Max, all of Warner Brothers programming and all of those things was going to go and be taken off platforms like Netflix and be streamed exclusively on HBO Max. One of the reasons people would subscribe. But the last year that Friends was going to appear on Netflix, how much do you think they paid to license Friends? That means they're licensing from the owners, Warner Brothers, the producers, the actors, everybody that has a piece of ownership in the TV show Friends. Netflix was going to pay a licensing fee to run Friends again. And do you know how much they paid for 1 year? $100 million. That's a nice chunk of cheddar for a TV show that you've been paid again and again on, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to get that kind of money for something you've already done? You know, it's like me getting views on short takes of Robservations. I already did the work, but by breaking up the show, it gets watched again. That's why shows go into syndication. You want to get those shows, the life out of them, and people always get paid. Maybe the returns are diminishing, but on a show like Friends, they're not. Now, for those of you who don't know, most TV shows, and again, I'm painting this with broad strokes, most TV shows don't make money the first couple of years. They're made at a deficit, really. And what happens is, when you get to a certain point, a show can be sold to other territories. It can be sold to France, can be sold to Germany, be sold to the UK. This is like network shows. And each one of those territories would pay money to show the show, to broadcast the show. So if you're involved in TV, if you're getting into year 3, 4, 5 of a TV show, and you own a piece of it, you're an executive producer, you're the creator, you can start getting big, fat checks as your show is sold around the world, and then the TV shows make a lot of money. That's what they have to generate, a lot of money. Now, in the streaming world, when you make a show for Netflix or something, you really don't get residuals. It's a buyout. And so one of the contentions that writers have had is that what if you have a hit show? Why is a hit show on Netflix worth the same amount? Why, as a writer, should I be paid the same amount for a hit show that I would be paid on, say, a show that doesn't do as well? That's why streaming services are reluctant to allow their viewing numbers out to, it's not the public, it's to the business, so people can hold them up. If you have creators you want to keep dealing with, like a guy like Scott Frank, he does Godless, 2017, 2020, you have, of course, The Queen's Gambit come out. He's a creator that Netflix wants to keep around. Netflix makes really lucrative deals for their good creators. So there's value in performance-based rewards, remunerations, whatever you want to call it. That's kind of how the way business works. If you do good, you make more money. But not in Hollywood. Not in Hollywood. In Hollywood, if they can, they will figure out any way to fuck you. That is why it is very important that it ain't show friends, it's show business. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. But sometimes, even then, double dealing, swindling, those bastards, those studio accountants, they'll figure out a way to get you in the end. Was it the Art Buchwald Coming to America? Was it that? I forget. It was long. Look up that. I think it was Coming to America. Look up the lawsuit that was brought against Paramount, I think, for that one. But anyway, there was a story that dropped yesterday or 2 days ago that I could not believe. And I thought that, I just realized I've got to add my camera to a layer before I jump over to that. But, yeah, this is a very interesting tale and something that's ongoing. So we shall see what eventually is going to happen with this tale, because it is a fascinating, well, it's not nice, put it that way. What I'm about to tell you about is, and it shows why, it graphically illustrates why it is important to make sure that you get what is coming to you. It's very important. So let's just jump right into this, shall we? And here we go. Now you can see me. So Disney keeps 80% of streaming revenue by calling it home video. So again, this was written by Gene Madhouse, and it was from February 23rd, 2021. For years, Disney has been keeping 80% of the revenue from older shows that it distributes to streaming platforms, leaving only 20% to be available to stars and other profit participants. Now, I want you to keep in mind, $100 million to show Friends for 1 year. Not every show is Friends, but $100 million. So Disney has been calling, they would call Friends, if it was theirs, home video. Well, for those of you who might not be keeping track at home video, well, let's read this article and I'll jump in later. It does so by classifying the revenue. Well, let me start again. For years, Disney has been keeping 80% of the revenue from older shows that it distributes to streaming platforms, leaving only 20% to be available to stars and other participants. So the people that actually made the show, the producers, the great cast of Friends, if you're working for Disney, you would be getting fucked. It does so by classifying the revenue as home video, under a formula dating from the introduction of the VCR 40 plus years ago. Disney subtracts an 80% royalty to its in-house distributor to cover costs of distribution. Nowadays, it doesn't cost anything. Everything's on a file. I mean, it costs something, but in 2017, Bill Nye, the star of Bill Nye the Science Guy, challenged that practice, calling it yet another example of Hollywood accounting. In a lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court, Nye argued that the actual distribution costs for platforms like Netflix and Amazon Prime are minimal, and that Disney is essentially raking millions of dollars off the top without justification. Bill Nye the Science Guy always bet on science. is correct. But earlier this month, a judge sided with Disney. Judge David Cowan ruled that Nye's 1993 contract allows the studio to continue to classify streaming and download revenue as home video, and to continue to take the 80% royalty. Nye's attorney, Raymond Hamrick, said that he would appeal. "We think the judge's ruling was an error," Hamrick said. "Unless the ruling is upheld on appeal, it does not establish a precedent that could be applied in other cases. But it still bothers attorneys who represent performers in profit participation lawsuits. They argue that Disney is simply grabbing whatever it can based on a tortured reading of contracts that predate the streaming era. They're trying to stick it into the category that will allow them to keep the most amount of money while ignoring why they were entitled to get that to begin with," said attorney Jeff Croncius, partner at Kissel Law LLP. "It doesn't make any sense at all," says Douglas Johnson, managing partner of Johnson & Johnson LLP. "Home video is not the same as streaming. They're not even close." Johnson argued that all of the streaming and download revenue should be allocated to gross receipts. In his experience, that is how most studios, 75 to 80%, handle streaming and download revenue on older contracts. At the time Nye signed his contract, streaming and digital downloads did not exist. But pay television, cable, HBO, Showtime, etc. did exist and typically offered a premium licensing fee. Johnson argued that streaming is more akin to pay TV than it is to distribution of physical DVDs and VHS tapes. "This is a pretty draconian thing for studios to be doing to an artist," Johnson said. "They know the big money is coming in from Netflix. To try and stick it into a home video license, they don't have any justification." In Nye's case, the profits were to be split 50-50 between Disney on the one hand and Nye and his producers on the other. That's more equitable, and that's kind of how it should be. Under Disney's reading of the contract then, 90% of streaming and download revenue stays with Disney. Only 10% is available after costs are deducted for the creators of the show. At a court hearing in December, a Disney accountant testified that a studio has deducted the 80% royalty from streaming revenues ever since those revenues started to come in around 2008 or 2009. Disney's lawyers argued that from the viewer's perspective, streaming is similar to home video and represents an evolution from the earlier technology. Yeah, kind of like the horse-drawn carriage represents used to be what people got around it. Now they have automobiles, but we're still gonna, everything's gonna be decided on the contracts we wrote about horse-drawn carriages. Nye's contract contains language that was standard at the time regarding revenue from video devices. Nye testified at the December hearing that he thought that referred only to a plastic rectangular thing such as VHS tape. Nye further testified that to consider home video device to be software would be illogical at best. Among other things, the word manufacturer requires there to be a physical object, and a digital file is not a physical object or a manufactured device, Hamrick wrote in a brief. Cowan, the judge, wrote that Nye's testimony was credible, but he held that Nye's reading of the contract was unreasonable because it would mean that Disney would not be able to collect any distribution fee at all. He found it implausible that Disney would allow that to happen. Johnson argued that the judge had failed to fully consider how cheap it is to distribute content to Netflix and other streaming platforms. It's one hit of the button. It digitizes the content, you're done. Well, it's not that easy. Johnson said they don't have any costs. This is a total windfall to the studio with no justification. He also argued that if the ruling stands, Disney's accounting practice could be adopted across the industry. These streamers are paying these big first window license fees that are usually your largest gains on the title, he said. This should be a wake-up call to all the artists who make movies. This is outrageous. Oops, sorry about that. Lot to unpack here, but I wanted to say, first of all, I myself was involved in a pretty large entertainment lawsuit, and it was involving the first Agent Cody Banks movie. And one of the things that I learned in this lawsuit is when you are dealing with judges and you are dealing with, say, an arbitrator, a judge who might be an arbitrator, is that you cannot expect judges to understand the intricacies of the entertainment business and how it all works. We who work within the industry, we understand these things, but a judge doesn't. You know what a judge does? They look at your contract, because you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And Bill Nye's contract that he signed, according to this article, in 1993, DVDs didn't exist, Blu-rays didn't exist, computer technology that exists now didn't exist. Only home video existed, and pay cable. That's it. That's it. So what happened was, 15 years later, essentially, the streaming model began. Something that didn't previously exist came into existence. And Bill Nye is now locked into a contract he signed in 1993 that, of course, if the judge looks at the contract, that's what you signed. It says it right here. It's cut and dried. There is no ambiguity to the contract that you signed. However, the world changed. The world evolved. And I think that what Disney is doing, while yes, indeed, it is, you could argue that, nope, this is the contract you signed, we're done. That might be true. And according to this judge, it is true. But we all know, that any normal human being knows, that, wait a minute, you're now distributing my product, me. Same thing kind of happened to Dave Chappelle, I'm sure. You're distributing this. You're making money off something I made, that I had a contract that I was guaranteed. My producers, everybody who made this contract, or everybody who made this program, were guaranteed by our contracts. And there's the idea of the spirit of the contract. What did we enter into? One of the problems that I have with the modern age, but I'm going to keep it in terms of Hollywood, is that everyone is using the evolution of our culture, our technology, our way of life, and they're trying to use it. They're trying to use that evolution as a way to weasel out of the spirit in which contracts are entered into. And in the case of Disney, hey, it's cut and dried. You sign this contract. But on the other hand, Disney is now, because they're in the position, because they have the material, they themselves are utilizing a new form, streaming, and they're trying to define streaming as as home video. They're saying that, nope, streaming is exactly the same as home video. It is not. It is not. And therein lies the crux of all of this. Disney knows it. Bill Nye knows it. The judge might not understand the intricacies of the difference between home entertainment, home video, and streaming. It's a very different thing. Bill Nye was onto something when he said, look, I thought home entertainment means a software that you're manufacturing and putting out there where you have sales figures and you can look at that and there's numbers and all that. Streaming is not that way. Disney is disingenuously trying to reframe streaming as the same thing as home video. Well, in my mind, this is the problem with pretty much our entire civilization. That everyone's trying to make a quick buck, a fast buck, and they're trying to do it by being, well, lying. They're being disingenuous. Of course Disney knows that streaming isn't the same thing, but they're a big corporation and their job is to make as much money as they can. And to sit there and listen, why don't they tie in licensing fees to the sales figures of physical media, which have been plummeting steadily over the last 5 or 10 years? The whole thing is ridiculous. Disney knows, and Disney is, at this point, they're being disingenuous, and they are fucking their creators. The very people that are creating the material that they are profiteering off of, they are now, first of all, they're lying. They're actually lying. They know that home video is not the same as streaming. It's not. That's what the WGA was getting involved. That's what they were fighting for. That's why all the Writers Guild of America writers went and fired their agents. I mean, there's a lot of craziness happening because of streaming. Writers are working just as hard but getting paid less. Television shows are no longer 26 episodes a season or 30 episodes a season. They're 8 or 6 or 10. So there's a lot less money. studios are making a ton of money, and again, the creators are getting boned because of it. Boned. And the thing is, eventually, down the road at some point, Disney's going to have to admit, okay, anybody, because after these things drop, now people are going to make sure that in their contracts, it's going to say, normally when you sign a contract, it'll say in perpetuity throughout the universe, meaning basically forever in the infinite cosmos. You're going to have to work in, if you're negotiating a deal, that says if any new forms of distribution occurred, we will renegotiate in good faith, or I don't know what the legalese language is, but you'll have to put that in the contract. Bill Nye didn't put it in the contract because in 1993, nobody even understood there was going to be DVDs. So what is distressing here is you would think that in a perfect world, Disney would say, you're right. Since 2009, we have been 2008, 2009, as it says here in the article, we've been lying to you. We've been lying to you, and we've been using an old rule that was created in the late 70s, early 80s, and we've been bilking you out of what you rightfully deserve as the creator and talent of this show. They've been doing it knowingly for over 2008, 13 years. The reason they're fighting this so hard is because if they lose, then they owe every single other person, which could probably mean hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue. That's why they're fighting this so hard. And of course, I'm not saying it's just the judge doesn't necessarily want to do that, because you set that precedent, then you're harming a major corporation. This is the time for out of court settlements. This is the time when Disney, rather than, they're going to fight this tooth and nail, because if they win and they've won this first round, they might lose on appeal, but right now they won. They're not, they'll fight this till the end of time if they have to. But what they should do is, stave this off, or what is it, not stave this off, but head this off the pass and do the right thing. I mean, can't expect big business to do that, but our entire civilization is all about this kind of thing now. We talk about capitalism. I love capitalism, and you know what? Having a bit of socialism and capitalism isn't necessarily a bad thing. I believe in capitalism. The problem with our current modes of capitalism is has been perverted to cheat every way it can. Shareholders, publicly held companies, there is no incentive to do up-and-up business. And I get it. I understand. I'm not naive. I don't believe that we live in a kumbaya world. The universe is indifferent to your suffering. A solar flare could wipe us all out in a second. And who would care all of the toiling that humanity has done for the last, since we came out of the trees? It wouldn't matter. I get it. I understand that. But our lives would be a lot easier if people were a little bit more honest in the way they did business. Capitalism would work better, certainly. I know that's naive to think. But in this case, Disney knows they're doing the wrong thing. They knew they were doing the wrong thing when the advent of streaming happened, so they've been getting away with it for 13 years, thinking, we'll come to this bridge, we'll cross this bridge when we come to it. Well, with Bill Nye the Science Guy, and it's kind of neat that it was Bill Nye the Science Guy that brought this up. And I know other people in the industry that are involved in things with this very same thing. But the real question is, how long does Disney get away with fucking their creators? Because, you know what? If they're delivering entertainment, whatever IP, think about it, Pixar, Marvel, I mean, they own all these things. But if you're going to license or you're going to work with other people, you want those other people to want to work with you. And I think it's really important to show, I know, it ain't show friends, it's show business. But if the world changes, and Disney knows it's changed, and they're trying to shoehorn streaming payments into home video, I mean, that is some disingenuous shit. And that's chicanery of the first order. And it's not unexpected. Do I blame Disney? I don't blame them. I don't. They're doing exactly what I would do. I wouldn't want to pay out all that money because they've let this go for so long. What they should have done is they should have said, oh, streaming is the future, especially because they've started their own streaming platform. Why not take care of this before it reaches where we're at now? Where the entire industry is following this story, wondering, wonder what's going to happen. They probably will ultimately not end up having to pay. Bill Nye will lose, but moving forward, things will change. So for the last 13 years, Disney will have gotten away with thievery that they will say, nope, it's under this. You know it's not under that because streaming isn't the same as home video. It's not. And you know it. It never was. It doesn't bear any resemblance to home video. Are you manufacturing and shipping a product? Are you looking at how many units that product sold? And I'll tell you something else. If that's the case, maybe somebody should take the tactic where, all right, well, if this is home video, that means that every view, we're just going to assume that every view that somebody had was a sale or a rental. I would say it was a sale though, because you were doing sell-through, right? So if it's home video, whatever that model is, give me your viewing records. Show me how many times my program has been seen, and let's go from there. I would use what they're doing and say, okay, what was our deal for home video? Look at it that way. Did we have like every 100,000 copies of whatever that shipped, or every whatever that was? Go after them that way. That's the only way. You're never going to beat them. You got to be more creative. But it's distressing for me to see something like that. It bums me out because it's clearly something that we know they know is wrong. Bill Nye knows is wrong. The only person who doesn't necessarily know it's wrong is the judge, nor can he be expected to know. As I learned in my own court case, they have no idea how the entertainment business works. You can say what intent is. All that the judge can do is look at what's on paper. What did you sign? What was your contract? That's all they can go for. You can't ask them. It's kind of like amendments to the Constitution of the United States. The time they were written is different than now. And the way that our government was set up is we were supposed to be able to change the Constitution as our democracy grew and flourished and evolved. That's why there are amendments. And yet, there's a lot of people that'll point to amendments and go, see, it's got to be just like that. Well, when that was written, the world wasn't just like that. The world was very different than it is now. So are you saying that the people that wrote those amendments, or the framers of the Constitution, if they were alive today, they would have written the exact same amendment? Of course they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't. Because things change. Hell, even if you were writing, say, rules about computers in 1982, or make it 1984 when the Macintosh was introduced, and you were talking about charging people for bandwidth back then, if they were able to do that, but just say they were. Would things be the same way they are now? Basically, look at how computers. It's actually really a pretty good analogy. No one would think if there was some kind of a rule about how computers could hook up to the internet, there was no internet, but hook up to the telephone system or whatever back in 1984, that somebody would point to that rule and go, it's 2021, we have to have it exactly the same as it was written back then, because the world has evolved way beyond that. But Disney would say, nope. We've signed deals based on that. We're not going to change. So anyway, I think Disney should have a nice out-of-court settlement, and I think they should do that. Of course, they're going to have to weather a storm of a lot of people going, wait a minute, you've been fucking me for 20 or 13 years? Yes, we have. Well, I'm going to take you to court. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of creators lining up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think it really speaks on a larger level to the United States, to America. This is done all the time throughout every single business. Everybody wants to save a buck. How can we... we're going to save $1 in screwing people over. That's how the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis happened. Everybody's trying to make money, but not doing it on the up and up. And then look what happens. It happens all the time. You'd think people would learn, but they don't. And look, it isn't just Disney. It's any business. Any business will be doing what Disney's doing. They would have to. but it's a little disappointing. I mean, and it's Bill Nye the Science Guy. Who doesn't like Bill Nye the Science Guy? Can you believe that? Well, everybody, that's the end of that story. Let's talk about Star Trek. I know I haven't talked about Star Trek very much. I don't talk about it enough, right? Well, the big Paramount earnings call came, and boy, everything was announced. Hey, Kelsey Grammer is going to come back as Frasier. I guess that's cool. But of course, we really talked about what we're going to talk about, Star Trek. There was a lot said about the future of the Star Trek franchise, and presumably, just like this picture of the Starship Enterprise plunging into the Earth's atmosphere, I feel that the entire Star Trek franchise since 2009, this is a pretty great metaphor for the entire franchise. Burning up in the atmosphere, and eventually it will fall to Earth and just be obliterated. That's pretty much where I feel the Star Trek franchise is concerned. And this earnings call had a lot to say about Star Trek. Now, before I begin, I would just like to say that on the new Star Trek project, Prodigy, that's being done for Nickelodeon, I know people that are working on that show in a writing capacity. I know somebody who's consulting for it who I am a huge fan of their work. Huge fan of their work. And I don't doubt that they are capable people that can create magic when called upon. I don't blame them at all, and I'm sure they're doing the best work that they can. But for those of you who might not have seen it, here is the principal cast of Star Trek Prodigy, the new animated series that is going to be on Nickelodeon. Now, what's interesting and what they're talking about is this is going to be the first Star Trek television series that has no human beings as members of the principal cast. Now, clearly, when I look at this picture, I'm thinking there's Drax, there's Gamora, there's Star... Oh, wait, hang on. But clearly, I'm not the only one. I'm not projecting. This doesn't exactly scream Star Trek to me. It screams a bunch of other things, which is not surprising because since 2009, every effort has been made to change Star Trek into something that isn't Star Trek, that is something else. They've been trying to shoehorn Star Trek into those things. And in my mind, it hasn't worked. And I think in terms of earnings and ratings, I don't think it's worked either. But there is other concerns at work or at play than just the amount of money they're making. What they're doing is, well, I think they're trying to solidify the overall Star Trek IP by you just keep making things and keep that IP chugging along. And if we have to take a bit of a loss, we'll take a bit of a loss to make sure we hold on to that Star Trek IP. But what I really wanted to talk about was, once again, the steward of the Star Trek franchise, Mr. Alex Kurtzman. And normally I wouldn't, I don't like calling people out personally. But I do find it fascinating that every time he opens his mouth as a creator of Star Trek, he seems to be wholly unaware of Star Trek history or what it's supposed to actually be. And I want to go to an older quote from him. This is something that he said. Trek was always fully formed adults, already in Starfleet, and people who have decided who they are. And it never was aspirational that way. It's important to me to find a way to go back and reach younger kids in a way that Trek should and never really has. This might be one of the most ignorant and asinine quotes I've ever read a creator say about the very franchise that they're working on. And if I was his employer, if I employed Alex Kurtzman, I know he's got a contract that's pretty probably ironclad because they know what's up. They get the right contracts. He got a smart contract. But here's somebody that is saying something, to my mind, worse than, say, certain actors have said about other things. And not because this is somebody who is directly addressing the very franchise they're making, who is the steward of that franchise. And with this statement is making an unbelievably ignorant statement about the very thing they're supposed to be the steward of. And if I had somebody say this publicly, I'm like, why are you running this jewel of our franchise? Clearly, you don't know what the fuck you are talking about. And how can I say that? Because when I was 5 years old, I was enamored of Star Trek. And I think most of the people you would talk to my age would say the same that are Star Trek fans. Not only that, Star Trek was an award-winning Saturday morning cartoon as well, beginning in 1973. I mean, it only ran 22 episodes and 2 seasons, but still. I mean, people seem to forget about that it was an award-winning cartoon series, animated series. And, I mean, a lot of people, even my age, first came to Star Trek as a animated show. But you know what was interesting about the animated Star Trek? It still showed who? It still showed fully formed adults already in Starfleet and people who have decided who they are. As a child, I aspired to be those people. I wanted to grow up and be them. Now, while I think it might be interesting that you're going to do a Star Trek series about these people, I'm never going to be these people. I mean, I might see them as heroes or friends or whatever, but this is not something that I, as a human being, as a human child, can watch and aspire to grow up to be. And I think one of the most important things about Star Trek is it's a look at our human future. Sure, there's lots of aliens in it, but what we want is to see a reflection of where humanity will be in the future. It is a reflection of us. And by removing that, first of all, by removing the human element from Star Trek, you're no longer making a Star Trek show. You're making a different show. You're moving your franchise into a different realm. I would dare say you're diluting it. As a matter of fact, why even call it Star Trek? You're now slapping Star Trek. Why not? I look at this and I have to say, to be honest, I'll tell you something. Look at these characters. I like these characters. I think the design is pretty cool. I like the colors. I like the way they look, even though they're redolent of a bunch of other things. That's okay. You know what this reminded me of when I first saw it? It reminded me of a favorite comic of mine that people always laugh at me for liking. Atari Force. Drawn by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez and written by Gary Conway. I loved Atari Force. This is something different. This doesn't say Star Trek to me at all. And yet, that's what they're doing. Now, let's get into what was said by our beautiful stewards of the franchise. This was on Deadline yesterday. It comes from Dominic Patton. It was published at 2:15 on Deadline. And let's just get into this, shall we? Because boy, oh boy, isn't this illuminating. Star Trek Prodigy to launch on Paramount Plus, Nickelodeon next. Franchise front and center on new streamer. There's going to be even more Star Trek on Paramount Plus than initially anticipated. The March 4th launching Viacom CBS streamer revealed today that Star Trek Prodigy will now be making its premiere on the platform later this year. Originally, as Deadline reported exclusively last summer, the kids-oriented CG animated series was set for Nickelodeon. And Prodigy still is, kind of. Dropping a first look today, see above, the 20-episode first season of the series created by Kevin and Dan Hageman will have a second window on the cable channel following its Paramount Plus premiere. Neither debut dates for the first time ever Star Trek series. Neither debut dates for the first ever Star Trek series for children in the franchise's long history were announced on Wednesday at the Paramount Plus Investors Day presentation. The first ever Star Trek series for children. I don't know what to say to that. Do they really think that? I mean, Star Trek always appealed to everyone. It was a show that kids latched onto for a number of reasons. Also, teens latched onto it, college-age students latched onto it, and adults. Star Trek was a show for everyone. That's what was so great about it. It was aspirational for everyone who watched it. And this idea, it never was aspirational that way. It's important to me to find a way to go back and reach younger kids in a way that Trek should and never really has. Kurtzman, what the fuck are you talking about? I grew up in a generation where Star Trek appealed to kids. There is this weird thought that it somehow didn't, and you're going to change it once again. Let's change Star Trek. We change it into Star Wars. And by the way, you were the one, where's Bob Orsi? He was the one that knew about Star Trek. You were the admitted, I don't know anything about Star Trek. Well, clearly, you've constantly been showing us this. And it's just incredible to me that you look at this franchise. You know, I wonder, do you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe only appeals to kids? Does the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the most successful entertainment franchise that ever existed, do you think that people think to themselves, you know, we should make WandaVision more aspirational to 5-year-olds? Or perhaps Captain America, the Winter Soldier, why don't we do young Cap, and we'll do the early days, we'll do before Steve Rogers, we'll do him when he was like in elementary school and how he still stood up to the bullies back then, so kids will find it appealing. Even Star Wars' animated shows, whether it's the Clone Wars or whether it's Rebels, maybe not so much Resistance, but they were designed to appeal to the entire fan base. Anyway, let's go back and read the rest of this article. This scintillating article. It's amazing. First ever Star Trek series for children in the franchise's long history. This is about having the best of both worlds in terms of utilizing the Paramount Plus platform to expose Trek fans and their families to this incredible show for them and their children, and in our early days of Paramount Plus, give a lovely boost to the platform, Paramount Plus's Executive Vice President of Development Programming, Julie McNamara, told Deadline. Then to have it be on Nickelodeon linear following that would expose it to a kid audience that may not have had the initial Trek interest, the exec added. Yeah, because no kids watch Next Generation either. You know, it was only us kids that were, you know, younger in the 70s. So the combination of the two gives us the best possible chance of hitting all of our demographics and targets in terms of the expansion of the franchise that it promises, McNamara continued. Added Ramsey Nato, President, Nickelodeon Animation, debuting Prodigy on Paramount Plus alongside the complete Star Trek universe, points to our strategy of growing Nickelodeon's reach by expanding our top franchises and diving deeper into their worlds and their characters and stories. Centering on 6 non-human misfits who take over a beat-up Starfleet ship that they know almost nothing about, Prodigy intends to advocate the Trekverse philosophy of inclusion, curiosity, and adventure. Okay, can I just stop for a minute there and go, there was never a Star Trek philosophy of inclusion. There was not. It was just an idea that would be the normal, natural, evolutionary state of human beings in the 23rd century. Of course we'd be inclusive. Once Earth joined a larger federation of alien civilizations, our petty differences on Earth of whether we don't like people because of their skin tone or where they're from on this planet would quickly melt away. As soon as we have aliens that don't look anything like human beings and they're smarter than we are, well then, any racial problems or strife we have on this planet would quickly go by the wayside. This idea that Star Trek was always about inclusion, no, Star Trek extrapolated on what a future would be with an entire federation, a whole galaxy of sentient individuals that don't bear any resemblance to humanity. We would have to man up, straighten up, and fly right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to be a part of such a community. So the idea was that human beings would put aside their petty, stupid differences that have stopped the growth on this planet for so long and get over our bad selves and join the galactic community. So the idea that they're now billing Star Trek, the first thing that comes out of anybody's mouth is it's all about inclusion. That was never part of Star Trek. Star Trek just took that for granted. They were showing us a post-inclusive society, the natural evolution of where humanity would have to wind up when it joined a larger galactic community. It wasn't something that should ever be front and center from Star Trek. What should be front and center from Star Trek is showing us a aspirational human future where all human beings are part of a civilization that has grown past its petty differences and has joined a galactic civilization of far more wide-ranging and crazy and diverse creatures and intellects, whether you're a Medusan ambassador and they carry you around in a box, or whether you're a Gorn or whatever. That was what Star Trek was about. And the idea that Star Trek is about inclusion. This is a problem. Anyway, the show is for younger kids, Trekverse overlord Alex Kurtzman said to Deadline. Kurtzman is an executive producer on Prodigy, along with Heather Caden, Katie Krentz, Rod Roddenberry, and Trevor Roth, and co-showrunners, the Hageman brothers. Ben Hibben will direct and co-executive produce, with Aaron Byers also serving as co-EP on Prodigy. As somebody who grew up watching certain shows that spoke to me as a kid, but then also spoke to my parents so that my parents could watch it with me, I think that speaks very much to one of the things that Trek does right. Families watch it together. A parent can watch it with their children. And this show is going to be for our youngest audience so far. But I think given the scope and scale of it, it's not really going to look like anything you've seen before, in that we have a really cinematic approach to what we're doing. The idea is, if we should be able to project this in a movie theater and it would hold strong and stand the test of a big screen, Kurtzman proudly stated of Prodigy, as the 7-year-old CBS All Access mutates into Paramount Plus this week. Similar to what Disney Plus has done with their Marvel and Star Wars properties and what HBO Max has done with their DC superhero content, Paramount Plus will have its entire Star Trek franchise in one place. You know what the difference between Star Wars and Marvel and what you guys are doing? You have yet to produce a new show that's any fucking good. Just saying. Along with Prodigy, there will be the newest shows of Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks, and the upcoming Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which we got a glimpse of in sorts in one of the many pumped-up promos that ran in the presentation. Plus, no pun, there will be hundreds of episodes of all the original Star Trek series and the likes of Next Generation and all the rest, plus the Star Trek movies. As franchise boss, Kurtzman proclaimed in a video shown during the sprawling and somewhat delayed Paramount Plus presentation, if you put them all together, it forms a very complete package, Kurtzman noted of the Trekverse, and that is really nice because our goal has been to make sure that you don't watch one Star Trek show and think, well, I've seen this one, so I don't need to watch the other ones. What Star Trek fan has ever said that? Ever. It's cohesive, very curated, and a manicured approach that we've taken. Really? Where's that approach? Where's your cohesive? You're cohesive to your approach, but let me tell you, I will say this. There are people that watch Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and even Enterprise. And a lot of those people take a look at what you've created with all of the murder and all of the violence and all of the bad language and all of the idiocy being displayed on the bridge of the Discovery by your half credible crew, and they've tuned out. But hey, you've got inclusion, right? I don't see a future for this franchise until you get somebody in there that is going to learn what Star Trek is all about, which is about the aspirational human future. And we're not getting that show. You've made 3 seasons of Discovery and a season of Picard, and it is some of the darkest, meanest, most dystopian shit ever. Where is the aspiration? Where is it? Where's your belief in the human future that Star Trek always was showing us? Because it certainly hasn't been in Star Trek since 2009. It doesn't sound like it's going to be in Star Trek anytime soon unless you're a fucking 7-year-old and seeing characters that are not even human. Where's your aspirational human future here? I guess these people are better than we're ever going to be. So that's why you're putting them on Nickelodeon. Let's teach kids to want to grow up and be people that aren't human. Anyway, just what I thought I'd say today. You know, when it comes to Star Trek, you can't expect me to be my bright and sunny self. You know I can't. You've heard it before. You'll hear it again. But by God, let's just move further and further away. And by the way, let me just say, I will be watching Prodigy because of all the new Star Trek shows in it. It has somebody's involved in it that's one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, and there are two writers in it who I have the greatest respect for. So I'm hoping Star Trek Prodigy will turn out to be a great show. I am. I will tune in, and I will hope to love it. I want to love it for my friend's sake. I hope they've written a great show. I hope it is a great show. I just wonder, where is our bright, aspirational human future here? Why is it we always have to make shows for kids where we can't show great human beings in kids' programming anymore? Either the kids know more than the parents do, or we give them monsters and aliens and creatures that are much more interesting than anybody they will encounter in real life. All right, then. What do you have to say? I don't know. Let's see. Omar94. I'm going to start with an Omar94 letter. Hi, Rob. Moderators in the Post-Geek singularity. Another movie anniversary is upon us today. February 25th, 2021 marks the 85th anniversary of the Charlie Chaplin movie Modern Times, which released on February 25th, 1936. A comment on desperate employment and financial conditions during the Great Depression, the film was released to critical acclaim and considered one of Chaplin's greatest achievements. Two noticeable things in this movie are Chaplin's voice being heard for the first time and for having the last appearance of his character, the Tramp. Also, the movie impacted pop culture with the iconic sequence of Chaplin going inside a machine and all through the parts like a worm. All in all, Modern Times is a major highlight in Charlie Chaplin's career. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Interestingly enough, I have our little Tramp as an action figure right there. Soon that shelf will be full of characters, not superheroes, but other movie characters. I'm a big fan of Modern Times. Look, Modern Times I think is a terrific movie, and it is the first time you hear Charlie Chaplin's voice. I just wish that, there were more people that were delving back into the silent classics. Actually beginning Charlie Chaplin's career and then moving forward and seeing things like Modern Times or The Great Dictator. And, it's the great. I lament that, but of course, as I've said, pop culture, after 20 years, it starts to fall off precipitously. And the problem, I think, with a lot of Charlie Chaplin's movies, unlike The Great Dictator, which I think everybody should see, it's really hard to relate. It's really hard to relate back to those films. But I think they're wonderful movies. I'm a huge Chaplin fan. But I want to thank you for writing that in because 85 years, man. You know what? The history of cinema has not been around that long, and I think it's great. I want to thank you for writing that letter in, Omar. This letter comes from a person has no name. That's what it's from. A person has no name. Hi, Rob. I've been wanting to write this for a while now. If anything, I hope it shows how much I appreciate you, your content, and you just being on YouTube in general. Enough for me, not that I'm anyone special, to sit down and write my thoughts out to a stranger on the other side of the country. Given the current climate, you can choose to read this letter on your show or not. Up to you. It only matters to me if you read it. This may be too long, and I'm no Willow. I've been watching you on YouTube for, I don't remember exactly, but probably late 2019 when I caught wind of John Campia's show. I really enjoyed your takes, and as fun as No Pants Thursday was, I wished you were there for every show. I first subscribed to the Burnettwork when you had roughly 15,000 subscribers. I think I first sent in a tip to you that one time you told the story of how you met your biological sister. After a few months, I started sending tips regularly. They were either for movie suggestions, thank you by the way, or just funny things I thought of with the sole intention of making you laugh. Fast forward to November 2020. I'm not going to tell you the exact usernames I tipped under because honestly, if you told me to fuck off live on air, it would hurt a lot. I wouldn't do that. I only said it to Alex Kurtzman. Let's just say I've sent some politically charged tips to your channel. I know it's no excuse, but I've been battling a drinking problem for years, and every time I sent in a shitty message, let's just say I wasn't capable of driving at the time. Listen, I have drunk tweeted before. I understand where you're coming from. Sometimes it never ends well. I also grew up in a household where both parents left Fox News on 24/7, and my dad constantly listened to Rush Limbaugh. Rest in peace, by the way. Toward the end of me sending those messages, I wouldn't even watch the show to see a response. I'd just wake up and kick myself around a while for being pissed off that I behaved that way yet again. So I'm sorry for those messages, and they won't happen anymore. I'll close by saying this. There have been times when I've woken up in the middle of the night from a nightmare and needed something to take my mind off what my imagination just put me through. Now, ASMR videos with hot chicks do work. But sometimes I turn on Robservations or Elizaviews and calm me down. I once had an episode of Elizaviews on in the background during a phone interview while under COVID lockdown because it was soothing and it made me less nervous. I listened to the whole Kill Bill review on a long road trip and it kept me awake and entertained. I love that. I love hearing that because I love doing that review with Elizabeth. That was fun. And I made it home. Barely. Anyway, thanks for the content you make. And thinking of a movie quote to end this, I don't know. My favorite movie quote is, "The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force." Maybe that means we should all try and use whatever our version of the Force is to actually try and make this world a better place. I think your show does that. Thank you, and all the best. Not Arya. Sorry. That comes from a person has no name. Well, thank you for that. That's a very nice letter. It's, it's, I don't know what, something is in the air. People are telling me what they think of me, either pro or con, but I'm here for 'em. I'm here for it both ways. I'm glad that, you wrote in. Again, it means a lot. It means a lot that you write in and say this. But look, I don't begrudge anyone. If you're working through your problems and you're keeping your chin up and you're trying to do something different, you don't have to apologize to me. I've done enough bad things in my life, or out of neglect or stupidity or wrongheadedness or laziness, whatever. I certainly have a litany of things in my past that could have been done, as Paul Reiser said in Aliens, that could have been better. And I think, recriminations or looking back, and I mean, I appreciate that you took the time to say those things. I really do. But remember, I mean, if there's another thing that I completely believe in that this channel represents is constantly moving forward. What's past is prologue. What happened yesterday doesn't necessarily have to happen today. If you were a shitheel yesterday, you can not be a shitheel today, and the next day, and the day after that. And I think that's what we all need to do. Is just concentrate on the future, because that's where we'll spend the rest of our lives. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for writing that in. It means a lot. So I appreciate you sending that in. Let's see. This one comes from Travis. Dear Rob, I want to say thank you. Your response to my last letter gave me a new perspective on Lucasfilm and fandom in general. This letter is to ask for advice on writing. For the past couple of years, I've been working on an outline for an epic sci-fi fantasy story. I've been able to come up with the characters and the basic outline of a story. The problem is about the actual writing of it. Every time I sit down and begin to write, I feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. This is a story I feel very proud of and I want to see made. I've been told by some to look for a writing partner, but I feel as if this is something I should be writing myself. Have you ever struggled with this? I constantly come up with ideas and always run into this problem. Becoming a storyteller is something I have tried to accomplish. I'm beginning to feel that I may never finish unless I start soon. I don't know how this letter will be answered, but I thank you for any advice I may receive. Best regards, Travis. Here's my advice to you, Travis. Here's what I would say about that. What is overwhelming you is you are thinking about, I think, the big picture. That you have this epic story that you want to tell, and in your mind, you're seeing the finished version of that story. And the problem is the version, the thing that you have in your mind is gigantic. It's huge. Whatever it is, it's your favorite series, whether it's Dune or Tolkien or Stephen R. Donaldson or J.K. Rowling or whatever the thing is that you've read that you've loved in the past. You wanna create something of equal merit. And so what's happening to you, I would venture a guess, is that is daunting. It's a daunting task. It's a daunting task for anyone. And I think what's happening is you're getting wrapped up, as many do, with the final product. And really what you want to do is what you need to do, and what everybody needs to do, is you need to fall in love with the process. Forget the final product. Forget that. What you got to do is you want to sit down, if you want to be a storyteller, if that's what you're wanting to do, rather than think about the end goal of creating, like you say right here, it's not like you're starting out going, so I'm going to write my first story about a character. Although that might help. What you need to start thinking about is thinking about the incremental process of how to get there. And maybe this might help you. You say here that you're able to come up with the characters and a basic outline of a story. If you have your characters, try this as an exercise. Give yourself some parameters. Write a short story about one of your characters. Just pick one. Whatever your character is, a short story. And I don't want you to write an epic story of your character. I want you to write a story about your character's a day in the life or one incident that happens. Like, say your character, I don't know, science fiction, fantasy, you could have any kind of, I don't know what kind of characters you have, so I can't speak to this, but pick a character that, like, I don't know, let's say you have a Han Solo, a charming rogue, right? Write a short story. Make it 5 pages. You're going to write 5 pages. You're going to write 5 pages about this character who, I don't know, wants something. Maybe they want whatever, and they're meeting somebody that has what they want, but the person that has what they want doesn't want to give it to them. That's it. That whatever that is. And I don't know if it's fuel for a spaceship. I don't know if it's arrows for the quiver. I don't know. Whatever that thing is. And write that 5-page short story. That's it. Just do that as an exercise. You could probably think about it. I mean, if you think about the story and you finally get the story ready, write that story. And in that story, in that 5-page story, look at it as an examination of your main character. Maybe it's his inner monologue or her inner monologue or their inner monologue, whatever the main character is, whatever your character is, and ask yourself this question: okay, why does this character want this thing that they want to obtain? They need it for what reason? Did they used to have one and they need more? Or have they always wanted one and never had one in the first place? You've got all these questions to answer. When did they first want this thing? How do they know that the person they're going to get it from has what they want? Did they contact that person? Just make it a simple idea. Or make it even simpler. Imagine your character. When was the first time, let's say they're a charming rogue like Han Solo. When was the first time Han Solo kissed a girl? Tell me that story. Or maybe a boy. Maybe Han Solo was having conflicting feelings and he ended up in a situation with a guy and realized, I'm not gay. I mean, I don't know what that story is going to be. I'm just saying that, or take your character and tell me the story about the first time they lost a pet. Write that story. Maybe the character's thinking back to their anniversary of when his beloved pet died, or he had to or she had to put the pet to sleep. Just write that. And I guarantee you, if you sit down and write that story, by the way, you'll use that in your epic book later. It's going to be part of the book, whatever it turns out to be. Might just be a couple of paragraphs, but that story, what that's going to do is it's going to develop backstory for your world, backstory for your other characters. Because you're going to write it in context of the universe that they inhabit, right? But then when you have this short story, this story down, then share it with people. Your mom, your dad, significant other, whatever. Read it aloud. Listen to the comments. See, this way you don't have to write a fucking novel. You have a 5-page short story. But that could be the building block. And if you think about it, what if you were writing 10 5-page short stories and 20 and 30. And suddenly you're writing these short stories about all your characters. And then you've got all these short stories. And you figure, how can I intercut and interweave or do whatever? And suddenly these ideas are going to come. The problem is right now you're thinking about this epic story that you're writing, when really you got to just bring it down. Write that first story first, and let that be the springboard that will take you further. That's and by the way, set yourself a time. It's 5 days, or make it 7 pages. You know what? Write 5 pages. Give yourself 7 days. I don't know what your work schedule's like, but make Saturday your first day, and sit down and what you're supposed. Here's my task to you, my friend. You, Travis, are going to sit down this Saturday. If you happen to be watching this show now, you're going to sit down and you're going to write a page. 1 page of whatever your story is going to turn out to be. Whatever this incident in your character's life, a day in the life or whatever. On Sunday, you're going to write another page. Monday, you're going to write another page. Tuesday, you're going to write another page. And Wednesday, you're going to write your 5th and final page. You're not going to go back and read what you've written. You're just going to write your first page on Saturday. Write your second page on Sunday. Write your third page Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Write those pages. Then you're going to have 5 pages. Then you know what you're going to do? On Thursday, you're going to read what you've written for the first time. Don't go back and read. Just write those pages. Don't sit there and don't fall into that trap. Just write the pages. Write the pages. Write the pages. Thursday, you get to go back and read them. You get to read all 5 pages. You make your notes. You do whatever it is you want to do. And then you spend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday rewriting those 5 pages. And on Monday, I don't know what the date is, on Monday, you send me those 5 pages and I'll read them live on this show. And we'll talk about them. How about that? That's my advice to you, sir. Go forth. Do what I tell you. No, we'll see where it goes. What do you have to lose? 5 pages. This one comes from I don't know who this one comes from, because this is not what I meant to click on. This one comes from Cinema. Rob, good day to you in the Post-Geek singularity. This will be a shorter letter than usual, but nonetheless, the subject is something that I have been trying to wrap my brain around since I first heard the news. In early 2017, it was announced that the sequel to the 1988 Eddie Murphy comedy Coming to America was in pre-production and scheduled to be theatrically released by Paramount Pictures on August 7th, 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen. I was personally really excited, for one, because the original film was the second R-rated film I snuck into in the theater as a kid, the first being 1987's The Lost Boys. I love the first film, and I credit it for a lot of my crass and vulgar humor that I use in my adult life and on my own YouTube channel these days. This film was Eddie Murphy for the first time in his career playing multiple roles in a film, and it was hilarious. The movie became one of the most quotable films for my friends that we still quote at parties and on drunken guy nights to this day. Needless to say, upon hearing the announcement by Paramount that Eddie had finally signed off on a script and that Dolomite Is My Name director Craig Brewer was helming the film, I was beyond stoked. Aside from loving Dolomite Is My Name, Brewer is a filmmaker that I have followed over since his 2005 sophomore effort Hustle and Flow, and then helming one of my favorite films of the early aughts with 2006's Black Snake Moan, which might be Samuel L. Jackson's second best performance behind Pulp Fiction. Everything seemed to be in place, and then, pandemic mania came along and the industry came to a grinding halt. However, they were clearly filming during the start of the pandemic, and they were able to get a cut they were happy with before the announcement that the film would be going to Amazon Prime streaming. See, herein lies the reason for my letter. It's been apparent for the last 25 years or so that Eddie Murphy has grown tired of the type of humor he was producing in the 80s, but after Dolomite, it seemed that his hang-up was behind him, and Eddie was more than ready to push forward and get back to the humor of his astonishing comedy heyday. So why, oh why, is the sequel to Coming to America rated PG-13. We all know the age-old defense of the PG-13 rating is that it can and will bring in more bodies to the cinema, resulting in bigger box office numbers, but this leaves me very confused. From what I've heard, the script that Murphy signed off on had an R-rated edge to it. They never specifically said it was R because it hadn't been filmed yet, but if this was the case, and it is now not getting a theatrical release, why wouldn't they go for broke and give the fans what they want and stick with the R rating? Who wants a sequel to an Eddie Murphy from the 80s to be a watered-down, family-friendly film? Help me out, Rob. The news was such a gut punch to my friends and I that we aren't even sure that we want to check it out. I know what you're going to say, that we shouldn't boycott it simply because of its rating, and honestly, we will definitely end up watching it, but seriously, it's on a streaming service, so butts and seats is obsolete. It's from director Craig Brewer, whose only non-R-rated film was the awful 2011 Footloose remake. I might defend that movie a little. Maybe. I'm not saying, but maybe I could. The R rating worked wonders for 2019's Dolomite. What am I missing here? And are you at all put off by this rating? I will be curious to hear what the PGS and yourself have to say about this. Sure, it could still turn out to be a good and funny film, but I just don't understand this turn with the rating, especially since it's being fully released on streaming. I know my nostalgia is running amok here, but I can't figure this one out. Thanks, as always, Rob, for doing what you do. Keep it up, sir. Live long and prosper. P.S. I know you're a fan of old school hip-hop, so please check out our latest episode of Film and Vinyl on the 2015 biopic Straight Outta Compton. Ooh, I'll put that in the live chat. Here, this goes in the live chat. Graham Sarden says there was a Footloose remake. Yes, there was. Let's hear it for the boy. Here you go. There it is. Check it out. And ladies and gentlemen, that was from Cinema Gulp. Listen, I would say this to you. Raiders of the Lost Ark was rated PG. It had lots of gunplay, a lot of violence. A dude gets ground up in a helicopter blade. And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was rated PG-13. So I don't think, I'm not going to tell you not to judge a film on its rating, but I would always say wait to see the film. The film could be riotously funny and still be, I mean, maybe it's not as raunchy, and maybe it is a little bit more family-friendly, but I certainly don't think that you should worry about a movie until after you've seen it. That's what I would say. Because, look, some of my favorite comedies of all time, Tootsie is one of my favorite comedies of all time. Arthur, the first Arthur, the real Arthur. Are you a hooker? I just thought I was doing really great with you. I love Arthur. I love Tootsie. They're both rated PG. I love Animal House. I love Porky's. I love all kinds of R-rated comedies, but that doesn't mean I didn't love Arthur and didn't love Tootsie because they were funny. I loved Get Him to the Greek, and I love Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Those might both be, I don't know what ratings those are. I don't remember. But I can't get enough of Get Him to the Greek. I would imagine that was probably rated R because of the drinking and drug use. But, yeah, I would wait. Don't be depressed yet. Always wait and see the film. And then if it's shitty, then be depressed. But even hope springs eternal. Even every time I sit down to watch an episode of Star Trek, I'm like, maybe Discovery will be good this week. It never is. But I still keep watching. But thanks for the letter, Gulp. I hope it's good. Now you're obligated, by the way, to write your review of Coming to America 2 because everybody wants to hear it. This one comes from Vesna Lukic, all the way, our girl in Sarajevo. Vesna says, hello, Robert, my fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I know I haven't been very active lately on writing letters, but I felt the need to write this one as a reaction to that article about Zack Snyder. It touched me very deeply, especially the part about his daughter. I think nobody could stay immune to that. Nobody except the owners of Warner Brothers, and I'm talking about the whole board, not just the chairman, whose soul is in their pockets. For all we could read and hear, Zack Snyder is such a nice guy, and I'm glad he has a chance to show his vision to the world. Doesn't matter if it's a 4 or 5 hour movie. If Scorsese can do it with The Irishman, so can Snyder. One of my most beloved movies is 4 hours long, and I'm talking about Return of the King, the extended version, of course. Now, all being said, hate's too strong a word. Let's just say I really don't like his vision of Superman. Hate is for his version of Lex. I purposely said Superman because I like his version of Clark Kent. Clark, as a boy, should be alone, without any friends, and confused for 2 reasons. He didn't know who he is, and he was different. And one thing you don't want as a kid is to be different from all the other kids. Children are cruel, and they attack and outcast all who look and act differently from them. He had powers, but didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. Even when he was bullied, he never used those powers against the bully, because in his core, Clark is a good man. If I had those powers as a kid, well, let's just say you wouldn't need a virus to reduce the human population. Clark was a good man, even though he was growing up with Jonathan Kent. He and Martha were the perfect parents for a Brightburn Superman, and I think James Gunn had the same impression, so he got the inspiration for his next movie. First, he told him he should let all those children die. Not people, children. Why? Because of selfish reasons to keep his secret. Next, he committed suicide in front of his son's eyes. As if that won't damage a young man's psyche, I don't know what would. That could be the birth of a supervillain. Why wasn't it? Because Clark is a good man and really cares for other people. All people. He was Superman long before the suit. He just learned that he could fly also. And now we get to Superman, and where my thoughts of Zack's vision diverges from those who like Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, as I do, Vesna. As I said before, I never had a problem of him killing Zod. It's because of his love for the people of Earth. All people, not just Lois. Clark was confused. Superman was never confused. He knew who he was and what he can do, and his determination was to use all he can to protect and save as many human beings as he can. His only problem was that he can't save everybody because he can't be everywhere in the world at the same time, and that bothers him. That is the only thing that bothers him. Not if people love him or not if they would make the statue of him in full size. That's why he would never ever make out with Lois when the people behind his back are dying under the ruins of Metropolis. I liked Man of Steel, but that scene lost me. In that scene, I should imagine what Snyder's Superman would be, but I didn't. I still had hopes. Those hopes were destroyed with his conversation with Martha in Batman v Superman. Be their monument or be nothing of that. You don't owe them anything. I have a feeling that those were Snyder's words to us as an audience. You want Superman as a hero? Well, you ain't got it. You'll have a depressed, pitiful, confused one of us, dude. But the fact is, he is not one of us. He is not a regular dude with his low self-esteem. He's an alien with superpowers and determination to save and protect us. I've heard some opinions that he is a Jesus-like character of the DCU. Well, he is not. I wish he would be because Jesus never gave up on humanity or felt depressed for having an ability to help people. The other thing that bothered me was even Snyder contradicts himself. In Man of Steel, he almost killed Zod and his followers for threatening Martha. In Batman v Superman, he did nothing to save her. Okay, he did say her name to Batman. Luckily, Bruce's mother had the same name. If she was called Betty, it wouldn't turn out well. But even now, I'm looking forward to see if Superman will have his redemption in the new Justice League and finally become a hero that he really is and was for decades. I don't want another depressed character in the DC universe. Wonder Woman is depressed because of Steve. Batman because of the death of his parents. Flash is so depressed that he doesn't have his own movie. Let Superman be the one true light shining, guarding the character. We all need that, especially in these depressing times. Live long and prosper, Vesna. I both agree and disagree with you, Vesna. First of all, great. Thank you for writing it. It's lovely to hear from you again. You're one of the foundational members of this community, so it's always nice to hear your lovely voice all the way from Sarajevo. I would say this. I think what Zack Snyder was trying to do was show us the forging of the Superman that we have come to know and love. And Man of Steel was called Man of Steel for a reason. It wasn't called Superman. And Batman v Superman, I mean, a Man of Steel sent him on his path. I guess by Batman v Superman, he was already supposed to be on his way. But I think that what we're going to see, and I would hope, like you, that by the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League, we will see a fully realized, fully forged Superman, and we will have an understanding of where he came from and how he is the way he is in our real world. I mean, our ideal of Superman as an entity is, I think, naive, because we want somebody that does represent truth, justice in the American way, apple pie, mom, all that stuff. But in the real world, if there really was a Superman, how would that be? Like, what would happen? And I think that's why I love Man of Steel, is because Man of Steel asks that question. Well, okay, if there really is a Superman in our world, how'd that go down? And I find that interesting. Like, I was never looking for that beacon of hope. I was waiting, like I knew that this was about his journey, but the fact that it never bothered me, because we're watching the forging of Superman in these movies, and that's why I like them. But I totally understand where you are coming from, and I think a lot of people feel exactly the way you do, and I think that's okay, and you're not wrong. But thank you for writing. It was great to hear from you. Dean Mikatich writes in again. Hi, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. I've been listening to you talk about Kathleen Kennedy and how you cringe when people attack her. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. Or at least try not to. Rob, you've stated that Miss Kennedy has worked on many great films from the 80s and 90s, and she got her producing credit on Spielberg's film E.T. I'm not going to dispute that, because her name is there in the credits for all to see. But what exactly did she do as a producer on those films? From what I understand, to get the credit of a producer, you can give money for the budget. That'd be the executive producer, or being fully involved with the actual production of the film itself. So what was her role as a producer on those films? I have seen an interview with Steven Spielberg, who talks about Miss Kennedy, where he states that when she was his PA and was meant to be taking notes during a story meeting, she would interrupt the meeting and say, "Why does he have to get the girl? Why not the dog?" I do not know what film that was for, but one thing is clear to me. She is not a creative person, which can only mean her administrative skills are top-notch, which is why she has been able to work her way up the corporate ladder and George Lucas through Lucasfilm and all its subsidiaries, LucasArts, Skywalker Sound, Industrial Light and Magic, would be safe with her in charge. She has the skills to run a company. Now, we all know at this point in her career that Disney bought Lucasfilm and all of its subsidiaries from George and announced they were going to release a new Star Wars film every year, starting with the new trilogy. It is here where I see Miss Kennedy made her first and many of her biggest mistakes. When George sold Lucasfilm, he had given Disney an outline for the final 3 films of the Skywalker saga, and that he was to consult on all things Star Wars when needed. Now, I don't know if it was the executives in Disney or the marketing people that said, you have to have all new characters in these films and not have original characters, but whoever it was gave the order to Miss Kennedy, and she threw out Lucas's outlines and started anew. If it was the marketing people that gave out these orders, well, we all know they're boneheaded morons that like to look at spreadsheets and ask the wrong people and the wrong questions when it comes to getting their data. As you found out, Rob, when making the features for the 20th anniversary Tron DVD, that is true. Now, I'm not going to go into the issues with the Star Wars films, as this has been covered to death, but needless to say, with starting afresh, she hired J.J. Abrams to make the first Disney Star Wars films with the mandate. I do know that she wanted him to do all 3 films, but he declined, as it would mean that he would be living in the UK for 6 years, minimum, working on those films, which he did not want to do. Man, I wish I could have been him. I would have been out the door. So they agreed on one. When J.J. was tasked with outlining the 2 films that followed his, I don't know, but he did set up a story element for the following films. We all know that got thrown out the window once Rian Johnson was hired to make The Last Jedi. I'm also going to take a guess and say Miss Kennedy had more creative control than she ever had on her previous films. Now, we know that even though she could bring in George Lucas to consult and make sure they're making the best Star Wars films they can, they only brought him in once for The Force Awakens and discarded his suggestions. It's speculation they had to bring him in for The Rise of Skywalker to help fix it. Rob, you have stated that studio executives used to watch the dailies of their films in production to see what was working and what was not. Did Miss Kennedy, who is being heavily involved with Star Wars, even do this with Solo? I find it hard that she was seeing all of this footage coming out daily and did not realize there's a problem with the film until it was 90% completed. Miss Kennedy is also the driving force behind the High Republic cross-media stories they are currently doing, which has gone down like a lead balloon and had not been well received so far. As I said, I don't think she is a creative person and should not be the driving force behind Star Wars. She should have hired her own Kevin Feige to run Star Wars once Disney wanted to start making more. Do you think when Disney bought Lucasfilm and Feige was in charge, he would have accepted the mandate for new characters to be the focus of these films? No, he would not. He would have had the original trilogy characters as the main characters and introduced new characters and have gotten past them and batten past them so they would be the focus of the second and third films. He might not have used Lucas's outlines for the sequel trilogy, but I'm sure he would have utilized George far more than he was with Kennedy. Finally, as stated, Miss Kennedy is the head of Lucasfilm and its subsidiaries. With the exception of LucasArts that was closed down when Disney acquired it, how are the other companies doing under her control? Are they being as innovative under her as they were under George? Over the last few years, you really don't hear much about these companies anymore. So, Rob, I've tried not to attack Kathleen Kennedy in this letter, but I do feel she should take a step back from Star Wars and bring someone in that knows what they're doing and let them run with it, while she gets her head down and deal with the administration of Lucasfilm, which seems more in line with her skills. Peace and long life, Dean. Dean, you know I love you, buddy, and I appreciate how much you've interacted with this community over the years. But I have to say, you just exemplified in this letter what I do not understand about all of fandom in regards to Kathleen Kennedy. And I mean this with all due respect. Why does everyone think they fucking know how producers work and the entertainment business works and how Kathleen Kennedy works? Everybody seems to know exactly how Kathleen Kennedy works on a day-to-day basis. And I find it odd. You know, I watch everybody. There's a lot of vitriolic commentary on the internet about Kathleen Kennedy and how she's not a creative producer and she's not this and she's not that and I'm like, how does everybody think that they know this? I don't understand. I don't understand. Like I would not presume how to do brain surgery, and I couldn't even begin to remotely comment on how brain surgery is done. I wouldn't know, like, if you're cutting around a cranium, do you go left or right? No idea. I have no idea. I don't know at all. But since you brought it up, let's start. Let me just look here. Okay. I'm going to go to Kathleen Kennedy's IMDb profile, and I'm just going to look under her producer credits. She has 107. 107 producer credits. No, I won't read all of them. She was the producer of E.T. She was the executive producer of, well, let's just look here in general. E.T. producer, Poltergeist the associate producer, which makes sense because those were being made at the same time, and she was working on E.T. She was the associate producer of Twilight Zone the movie, which Spielberg directed a sequence for. She was the associate producer of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. She was the executive producer of Gremlins, The Goonies, Back to the Future, Young Sherlock Holmes. She was the producer of The Color Purple. She produced The Money Pit. She was the producer of Empire of the Sun. She was an executive producer of a lot of movies. She was the producer of Always, Spielberg's Always. She was the producer of Arachnophobia. She was executive producer of Joe versus the Volcano, of The Land Before Time, Inner Space, American Tail. Noise is Off, one of John's favorite comedies. She was the producer of Hook, which Spielberg directed, obviously. She's a producer, produced Jurassic Park. She was executive producer of Schindler's List. She produced The Bridges of Madison County for Clint Eastwood. She produced Twister. She produced The Sixth Sense. Those are not Spielberg movies. She produced Snow Falling on Cedars. She produced Seabiscuit. Anyway, I could go on, and she produced Lincoln. So anyway, here's the thing. Let me explain what a producer does of her ilk. If you're a producer that works with the director, all right, so they're making Empire of the Sun, right? They have to show the fall of Shanghai in this movie. Imagine that. How are we going to do that? A good producer who has to be, a good producer has to know a million different things. Like, okay, we have to have how many extras in this scene? Are we actually going to go to Shanghai and shoot, or can we find something that can double as Shanghai? We need a bridge. We need period cars. Where do we get all the period cars? How do we get all those hundreds of period costumes? What about all the props they have? Oh, wait a minute. How are we going to feed all these extras and make sure they have bathrooms when we shoot on those days? Producers have to be incredibly creative. And now, are they being creative in terms of storytelling? Well, in a way they are, because Kathleen Kennedy is thinking, okay, how many extras can we get away with? I'm reading the script pages. I've listened to Steven talk about what we're going to shoot. I know for a fact the way he moves the camera, we're going to need a lot more extras. He's not going to shoot in close-ups. There's going to be some big wide angles. We're going to need a lot of people. Can we augment those crowd scenes? This is back in the 80s with digital technology. Can ILM do it? I mean, the amount of decisions and the amount of foresight that a good producer has cannot be underestimated. Cannot be underestimated. And Steven Spielberg is one of the greatest directors who ever lived. The reason he kept working with Kathleen Kennedy is because she could anticipate what he wanted and knew how to make those things happen. Steven Spielberg doesn't have to be like, Kathleen, I don't know if we have enough extras. Kathleen Kennedy's got it handled. She already knows. It's not her job to say, well, I think metaphorically you should see Christian Bale understand, like when he sees the flash of the nuclear bomb go off, that he's watching the soul of Mrs. What's-Her-Face go up to heaven. That's not her place. I'm just going to say that Steven Spielberg is not in the habit of keeping people around him that do not add to his productions. He's not that way. And nobody in Hollywood is that way, really. Even your best friends, if they start to let you down, it's problematic. So the problem that people have had with Kathleen Kennedy is only about one thing, and it's Star Wars. And I think that what you have to remember is, how is it that Kathleen Kennedy can be responsible for all of these movies that everybody likes, and yet, she's been, I didn't like Steven Spielberg's The BFG very much, and she was the executive producer of that, but I wouldn't, it's not something, it's only Star Wars. The problems that people had with Kathleen Kennedy began in, not even with 2015, they began in 2017 with The Last Jedi. Isn't that amazing? And Solo, I guess. Maybe before The Last Jedi, but it's basically all of the hatred from Kathleen Kennedy is coming from Solo. People talk about Rogue One. It's not just Kathleen Kennedy. There's a lot of blame to go around. And I would dare say that Kathleen Kennedy tried to make some really interesting hires. She tried to hire Lord and Miller. She tried to make it all work. And you know what? What you don't do is if it was probably the hardest decision of her life. She probably said no, and she had other people breathing in her ear like Lawrence Kasdan, who she'd known for 40 years. And it's like, this is not working. I can't even imagine what she was being put through. Plus, she has to deal with the higher-ups at Disney. So she's running a studio, and she's trying to be a creative producer. In her life, she's probably never had so much pressure put on her in her life. And so we don't like a couple of movies that she's made, and suddenly our entire childhood has fallen onto the shoulders of Kathleen Kennedy to give us something that we love. I don't understand why people don't go back and look into her filmography and see that this is a woman and a filmmaker that's worthy of respect. And it bothers me because I don't think it's really understood what she brings to the table, and it's always done by look, I love everybody. I love my fellow fans. I love my fellow YouTube pundits. But how many of them have ever actually worked on a film? And worked on a film in a producerial capacity. And no disrespect by that, but how many have? And yet, the way people talk, you'd think that everybody knows Kathleen Kennedy and knows exactly what she does on movies, has been into meetings or whatever. And people just haven't. I've never met Kathleen Kennedy. I've never been in a meeting with Kathleen Kennedy. I don't know. But I've been on set for an extended period of time on a lot of big, large Hollywood productions. $200 million Hollywood productions with a camera in my hand, running around talking to everybody that was involved in the production. I could ask any question I wanted to. Imagine what that was like for me for a year in Australia, where my job was literally to get out of bed every morning, go to the set of Superman Returns, and follow anyone and everyone around with a video camera while they're working and ask them what they're doing and how they're doing it. And when we were between takes or something, I went into producer Gil Adler's office and would talk to him. Tell me about how this movie works. And at night, when we were done shooting, I went into John Ottman's Edipe, and I would sit and watch him cut. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but that's what I spent years doing. How many people get that kind of an education? I, unfortunately, have not been able to apply any of that knowledge directing a second film since I've done all that. It's my great frustration. But yet people talk as if they have or that they know. I have to tell you, the idea, the being outside of the filmmaking process, unless you've been in it, or unless you've even if you've tried to make a short and get a short finish and all the things that entails, it's frustrating for me to hear people bitch and moan and complain about Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy is one of the most capable, one of the most knowledgeable producers who has ever worked in the entertainment business. Why? Because she's been working with some of the best people. David Fincher, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and yes, George Lucas. But it's not like she's working on the B movies that I worked on. I mean, she started working at a certain level and worked up her way up from there. This is what everybody does. Kevin Feige was a PA for Richard Donner. I mean, I just think we need to start giving her the benefit of the doubt as a producer. Now, the political agenda she might have and the force is female and all that, that's a whole different thing. But as a producer, she is demanding and deserving of respect. But I appreciate you writing in. And you know, Dean, I love you, man. I do love you. And I appreciate you writing in these letters because they're great. Durwood Coffin writes in. Durwood Coffin. Durwood says, let me see. Durwood says, "Good morning, Robert. As the fifth of 10 children, wow, growing up in a cash-strapped trailer in rural Florida, I find myself feeling envious of experiences related on your show. I'm a fan of Robservations, and I followed you since you were on Collider Heroes with the great John Schnepp. Oh, man, I miss the big guy. I first met that giant of a man at Wizard World in Chicago in 2004 and fell in love with his infectious enthusiasm and extensive knowledge of all my favorite topics. Growing up as so-called trailer trash, it's what he wrote, I didn't have the same experience as many of your viewers. We watched adventures in the radio. Watched, he puts in quotes. A great experience to becoming an Imagination Connoisseur. We didn't get our first television until Da surprised us with a black and white 15-inch set with an Atari 2600 in 1984. It came packaged together with Combat, Frogger, River Run, Pitfall, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I was cognizant of these properties from conversations at school, but it opened my world to new experiences. My favorite programs were on PBS, and my Da adored Westerns. He was an avid reader, so Louis L'Amour and John Jakes were prominently featured on the bookshelf. He also was fond of speculative fiction, so Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, David Brin, and Ben Bova were also featured along with Anne McCaffrey. He opened the doors to Star Trek and Doctor Who with many novels, notably Dreadnought, The Final Frontier, and Spock's World by Diane Duane. My DOS says my first visit to a theater was a drive-in showing of Star Wars in September 1977, but I was only 14 months old, so I don't recall it. I next remember going to a theater as a distraction when my grandpa passed in August 1985, when my DA's brother and mother's sister took us out to see Back to the Future. It is a challenge to get 8 rambunctious children to sit still and enjoy a film, but that Zemeckis production mesmerized us. It's no inexpensive thing to multiply the cost of a movie ticket to include 8 children, so movies were a rare treat. We did enjoy Sunday night movies on ABC, which is where I first watched Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'd already read the novelizations of each of these movies long before watching them, however. I adored the local library. I would check out 10 books, the maximum allowed, each week, and eagerly devour them, only to return the next Thursday for 10 more volumes. I read everything available by an author, and then I'd move on to the next author. Isaac Asimov wrote a lot of books, by the way. He did. You must have read the Elijah Bailey novels, like By Jupiter and The Caves of Steel. I always would read about a movie in the paper or on At the Movies with Siskel and Ebert, and then wait until it came out on CBS a year or two later to view it myself. No matter how much I wanted to see them in theaters, it simply wasn't feasible with our large family. I began attending movies at 14 after I landed my first job as an assistant to a pool cleaner in Palm Beach, Florida. I also managed to buy a VCR and a 19-inch color TV and began catching up on the films I'd missed. I fell in love with science fiction and fantasy films, and film noir always captivated me. Well, this letter would be torn up by my teachers, but I wanted to introduce myself and share my own love for the works to enjoy as well. Good wishes, Dwayne Swab. Well, Dwayne, I love that. Who's Durwood Coffin? Is that the name of a character? I don't recognize it, but it's a great name. Dwayne, I want to thank you for writing in. What a great letter. I always love hearing how people were forged into the imagination connoisseurs they are today. I mean, it sounds like even though you came from a large family and you were cash strapped, it sounds like you had some good people raising you, and that you're and I love the fact that he had those books and you became an avid reader. I mean, I think becoming an avid reader is the quickest way. Basically, when you're reading, you're injecting stories, you're mainlining them right into your imagination, even more so than when you're watching something on TV, because you have to obviously imagine all of it. And what a great way to become a fan of all this stuff. So what a great letter. Thank you for writing in. I appreciate it. And I miss John Schnepp every single day. Let's see what you guys are saying today in the chat. Ooh, yes, people are saying things. Wow. Here we go. Let's jump in. I think I've got to the end here. Let's see what we have. Just Going with E.T. sends in a tip and says, "Oh, great deity, grand appointed magistrate of nearby and far celestial realms. In regards to this Lord of the Rings talk, did you ever meet, interview, see, or witness Cate Blanchett or Liv Tyler in person?" I never did. I never met either one of those lovely ladies, and I wanted to. I love Cate Blanchett so much, and Liv Tyler too. I never met them. I never saw them. I was never around them. I can't tell you anything, so I'm sorry. Just Going with E.T. I'm sorry to let you down. Geek Central became a member, and Kirsty Steele became a member, and JF Cadron, it's Cadron, right? Became a member. Thanks for becoming members. Very much appreciate that, for supporting the channel like that. Oh, Willow is here. Uh-oh. Willow. Oh, Willow. Willow says, "Since you've mentioned the movie several times before, how does the original I Spit on Your Grave compare to the 2010 remake? Would you recommend watching the original to someone like myself who thought the remake was just all right?" If I answer this question, I don't see how if I can answer this question and not get in any trouble. Look, I find the original I Spit on Your Grave to be one of the roughest movies I've ever watched. And I watched it a lot when I was a kid. And I showed it to people for its shock value. When you're a kid and you get these... I Spit on Your Grave is not a fun movie to watch. For those of you who don't know, I Spit on Your Grave stars Camille Keaton. It was directed by Mir Zarchi, and it was also AKA known as Day of the Woman. It's basically about Camille Keaton, a lovely lady, goes to the countryside to write and to live on her own, and she runs afoul of 4 local yokels who spend an entire day hunting her down and raping her repeatedly. And it is a very, very, very rough movie. It is very uncompromising. And then afterwards, after she recovers from the horribly, horribly violent attack, she turns the tables on her attackers, and she goes after them one by one to kill them, to take revenge. And what was so shocking when I first saw I Spit on Your Grave is there is a castration scene. Well, it's not even, I guess castration would mean you lose your balls. But no, she cuts off a man's penis, one of her assailants. And it's hardcore with a butcher knife. And it's hardcore. And it's I think about it now, I'm like, oh, it's rough. Now you, Willow, I know this probably is perking your ears up going, But I do think it's not a movie I can recommend. I can't recommend the original. It's really rough. And now, of course, one of the things about the film is it has no music score. There is a verisimilitude to it that makes it rough. But I can't recommend it. But, not getting into people's pathology, I think that you might find it interesting. Let me say this. If you do watch it, I would be very curious if you would either write a review of the film or compare and contrast it with the 2010 remake. I think it's inferior. The 2010 remake is inferior to the original, but because of the time it was made. Randy Pena sends in a super chat, says, Rob, it's me again. It's a joy to talk to you. Did you know that if Matrix 4 does well, there's plans for a TV show and movie sequels and prequels? #M4. Oh, I don't doubt it, because that's what people are thinking now all the time. I hope it's good. I really do. Randy Pena goes on to say, Matrix Trilogy held the highest probably the highest grossing R-rated film for 13 years before it was broken by Deadpool and Joker. I wonder if Matrix can break the record again. I don't think it's going to break the record again. I don't see Matrix 4, unless it's incredibly transcendent somehow, but it might outgross Deadpool if it's great. I don't think it's going to make Joker's $1 billion, though. And look, clearly you're very excited about it. I, too. I want it to be great. I can't wait to see it, because if nothing else, the first Matrix was so great, and Matrix 2 and 3, people are like, wait, what? There's so much of those movies that are so out there, and then the battle for Zion and all that. I mean, I like watching those scenes because there are some amazing visual effects. I don't think it was what I wanted. I mean, my biggest criticism, as much as, like I said, even Matrix Reloaded, I can't tell you how many times I've watched the chase on the freeway that's scored by Juno Reactor, and it's the Don Davis Juno Reactor stuff. I love that sequence. And there's a lot of stuff in all three of the movies I like. I think Matrix is pretty close to a perfect movie. And again, where you'd go from there. But I think that the biggest failing of Matrix 2 and 3 is, the first idea that Neo is the savior of everyone locked away in the Matrix. They kind of got away from the idea of the Matrix itself, and it became much more about the conflict in the real world. And I thought there was a lot more fertile ground. What happens when a population realizes they've been hoodwinked? And we really didn't get into the everyday person. It was all later. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, shouldn't a science guy know that everything from digital to plastic is made of molecules? Wouldn't that make his physical software argument moot? I'm, of course, being facetious. Disney sucks. Well, thank you for that, 200 Watt Studio. That's very funny. Pod Racing Palpatine became a member. Thank you, Pod Racing Palpatine. What is the name? Are you do you race against Ben Quadinaros? And what does your pod racer look like? Simon sends in a tip and says, "Hi Rob, I think I respectfully have a disagreement with you about Star Trek the original series, and that is I have rewatched all 79 episodes, and I think a case can be made for a Star Trek Discovery approach. Star Trek was made during a time that special effects were limited, so for them, sci-fi was story and relation to that era's world issues. Every once in a while, there would be a space war episode, but I thought about this. Look at how the ship's going to warp from 66 to current day. What caused the way that special effects emulates warp speed? It's Star Wars. I think some of the blame can go to Mr. Roddenberry when he changed from Star Trek Phase 2 to the motion picture. To me, Star Trek is 2001 A Space Odyssey and not a Star Wars hybrid for fantasy, so the evolution is exactly where Disco, the J.J. Abrams Kelvinverse, comes into the picture. So the real issue is Paramount is the enemy because Star Trek is their answer to Star Wars. In truth, sci-fi fans like special effects, especially seeing a Wolf 359 or a Cardassian War, but still Star Trek is more than Star Wars. Star Trek was not made as a fantasy, and that is the problem that Paramount Kurtzman can't seem to understand. What is missed are the anthologies that explore civilization, romance, future sci-fi concepts, future medicines, new aliens, and cultures and societies. Look, I agree. I think you just nailed it right on the head. The problem with Star Trek, my problem with modern Star Trek is you're not telling Star Trek stories. They think they are. They've gussied up. They've managed to bamboozle themselves into believing that Star Trek Discovery is all about that. But that's the thing is, when somebody speaks platitudes, when Michael Burnham gives a speech, they're like, "Look, isn't that inspirational in Star Trek?" No, because in Star Trek, the original series, those speeches were given in context of the story that was being told. It's not like somebody stops and says, "Listen, let me start moralizing to you. Let me start giving you the Star Trek philosophy in a nutshell. Can I do that?" And I thought that it didn't work. It just doesn't work. The problem, again, with Star Trek Discovery, the stories. I think the storytelling, they're badly written stories. I think they're bad television, and worse, they're bad science fiction. And finally, they're terrible Star Trek. And I know that's just my opinion. I could go through and analyze them, but here's the problem. There's a lot of people that see themselves in modern Star Trek. And I think the thing about Star Trek is we're supposed to see people that we aspired to be. When you start seeing yourself in Star Trek characters, I think Star Trek's failed. Oh my gosh, Tilly's like me! I think Star Trek is about the people we dream, we hope, we aspire to one day become. And now, like everything else, let's give the audience who they want to be, let's give the audience who they are as opposed to who they want to be. And I think that's problematic. And because everybody needs to recognize themselves here, we have to have a crew full of people that our audience can recognize and want. Like, I wanted to be James T. Kirk. I was never going to be as cool as James T. Kirk, but I wanted to be him. That was the point. But if you're watching a show about people that like, I'm Tilly, or I'm Stamets, whatever, whoever you think you are, if you're watching a show where you think you're that character, I don't know. It's weird. But I think it all comes down to story side. But it's not about the visuals. It's not about the visual effects. It's about story. It's about story and characters, same as it ever was. And I think the problem is, I know that they want to make it more like Star Wars, but then do something else. Star Trek isn't Star Wars. The fact that they have star in the title, think about it. How many different cop movies are there? How many different lawyer TV shows are there? They can all be different. But for Star Trek to emulate Star Wars is a failure of the imagination, and it lacks understanding. The funny thing is Paramount wants it to be Star Wars because they want that money. But you're never going to turn Star Trek into Star Wars. You'll never make it happen because you're fundamentally changing what Star Trek is. What you need to do is find another franchise and develop that. It's just Star Trek has a brand name. What they're doing, they are diluting the Star Trek brand. They are devaluing their Star Trek brand. And the fact that they're coupling all of these modern shows to the legacy of Star Trek, I think is problematic. I think they'll find that out in 20 years, but, Mercer Create says, I love the Orville, not new Star Trek. They have good stories. The Orville does have good stories, but they're emulating Star Trek. It's like a riff on Star Trek, so it's almost the Orville. I like the Orville, but it's like almost like a really good Star Trek cover band, and that's not a bad thing. The lovely Emma Bannon is here. She says, Star Trek Prodigy looks so awful, just like every other Kurtzman entry. No subtlety, no nuance, and his interview gives me the impression that he doesn't actually like Star Trek. Well, let me tell you something. There was a reason they brought on John Ottman to be a producer in season 3. I think for 7 episodes. They had to go to an outside producer, an Academy Award-winning editor who'd worked on all these features and brought him in. How'd that happen? Ask yourselves, why did that happen? That's pretty crazy. Alex Kurtzman is not particularly interested in Star Trek as Star Trek. He's interested in it as a franchise owned by Paramount that he can control. Like, let's make as much as we can, why we can, when we can. Let's all get paid. Let's make some tons of money. But, he's also off making Clarice and whatever the hell else he's making. So, and everybody who's working on Star Trek, I don't see anyone who's necessarily passionate about it. You don't see those guys going on message boards like Ron Moore did back in the day when he was working on Next Gen, answering questions from people. I don't think I would love to sit Alex Kurtzman down and interview him for 2 hours, a straight 2 hours about Star Trek Discovery and everything they wanted to do with it. I think by 15 minutes in, you'd realize he doesn't really know what's going on his own show. Harry Nice Guy says, so after Star Trek Discovery, we get Star Trek Picard or Star Trek Prodigy. Oh, Lord, so sad. Cry. I know, man. I know. I don't know what to tell you, Harry Nice Guy. I know. It's a bummer. It is a bummer. Circus of Five sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, the trailer for Snyder's Army of the Dead looks dope. The more Disney airs its laundry, the stinkier the air we breathe. So sad. Hey, maybe the point of Prodigy is that humans don't make it. Blade Runner or Blade reboot PG-13. Say what now? Yeah, is that true? I mean, look, I don't know how you make a Blade movie that's PG-13. Honestly, I don't. I mean, maybe they have to because of a Disney mandate. It's going to be a problem. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Humans don't make it, but then again, if the whole point of Star Trek is that humans make it. We make it. We make it and things are great. That's Star Trek. At its core, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. That's what Star Trek's all about. Humanity has a bright future ahead of it. We're going to go through hell to get there, clearly, but we have a bright future. That's what Star Trek's about. So doing a Star Trek show without human beings seems to me to not be Star Trek. Why call it Star Trek? I don't know. Could be good, though. Hey, I want it to be good. If only for the people I know that are working on it, I want it to be good. Mr. Torrance says, yo, Rob. So The Running Man, the dark dystopian thriller that was bastardized into an 80s B-movie shtick, turning the original genre into an R-rated bad comedy and the original premise into quippy muscle-type nonsense, is getting a remake. What are your thoughts? Well, at the time, The Running Man was the fourth of the Richard Bachman novels. Now, when I was growing up, when I was in junior high school, I read my first Richard Bachman book, which was The Long Walk. I had no idea. My friend Shade knew, but I had no idea that Richard Bachman was Stephen King. He had written Rage, The Long Walk, Road Work, and The Running Man. I bought The Running Man at the bookstore. I want to say it was either a B. Dalton. I think it was B. Dalton. There was a B. Dalton books right next to the box office of the Crossroads Cinema in Bellevue, where I grew up. I grew up in Mercer Island, but in Bellevue, where I would go see the movies. And I bought The Running Man. I bought that paperback at that B. Dalton Books right next to Crossroads when I came out and was waiting for my dad to show up to pick me up. I don't remember what movie it was. And, of course, I was already a huge fan of Richard Bachman and read The Running Man. Now, we've seen things. The Running Man is very similar. Obviously, it had a Most Dangerous Game vibe. If you've never seen the Italian-directed film, there's an Italian director who directed Investigation of a Citizen Under Suspicion. What's his name? God, I forget his name. The Italian director who directed The 10th Victim. There's a movie that's pretty great. It's a hip Italian science fiction hybrid called The 10th Victim that stars Marcello Mastroianni and Ursula Andress. And in that movie, it's based on Robert Sheckley's short story, The 7th Victim, I think. Well, if you haven't seen The 10th Victim, it's a great science fiction movie. It takes place in a mod retro future, and there's a thing called The Big Hunt. And in The Big Hunt, you have to be a hunter or a victim. And it's like a reality TV show. And Ursula Andress faces off against Marcello Mastroianni. I mean, come on. And what you have to do is you have to be a hunter and a victim, which means you have to get hunted a certain amount of times, and then you have to be the hunter, and you have to kill your victim. And it's a show. The Running Man is very similar to that, where you accept the mantle of this. You're a hunter, and this guy wants to make money for his family, and it's broadcast on a network. It's a precursor to reality television. It's definitely Stephen King saw it when he wrote it. I'm sure he saw The 10th Victim. But It was a very serious story, and it ends, spoiler alert, it's not like it is in the book, so I'll tell you, it ends with our hero flying an airliner into the building that houses the network that puts on the show, The Running Man. I don't think they're going to be able to do that, but you never know. So yeah, I'm in. Count me in. Count me in. So I want it to be like the book. Roger Green says, or Grind, I think it's Grind, right? Grind. Hey Rob, I remember my grandma taking me to a science fiction store in Berlin where I bought my first Star Trek uniform. I guess she had no idea what that was all about, but she was nice about it. That is what verisimilitude is all about. I miss her. Well, I miss your grandmother too. That was pretty cool. She bought. Well, now I want to know, with your uniform, was it gold, red, or blue? Were you a Kirk guy, a Spock guy, a Scotty guy, Dr. McCoy guy? What were you? It sounds like your grandmother was great. Star Trek has been popular in Germany too. Germany and the UK. Those are the places where it's most popular outside the United States. So, did you grow up watching it? Harry Nice Guy sends in a super chat and says, "What will be the theme song of Star Trek Prodigy? Breathe, Firestarter, or Take Me to the Hospital?" After this article, it's yet another show I don't have to watch. You know what? I think it should be Firestarter. Delinquents who take over a starship. That's gonna end well. Another Star Trek show about misfits that are not the best of people getting to fly a starship. Great. Paulus Plain says, "The Burnettwork, my favorite shows this days are construction of the Tesla gigafactories, Berlin, Austin, and SpaceX Starship Super Heavy testing in South Texas." I got to tell you, I can't get enough of that. I just watched the Super Heavy on the launch pad steaming, waiting to take off. I agree. P.S. Have fun. 2020 TV films are, I guess you're going to say, fucking shit. Yep. I mean, the real world is delivering more genre thrills than some of our movies are. Certainly more than Star Trek. Should I say his name? Hyde1352 says, "Here's to D-Mac, David Mack, and hope that any new works of his aren't solely based in this new, woke, useless Trekverse." David Mack is one of my favorite Star Trek novelists. His Destiny trilogy is amazing. His Mirror Universe duology is amazing. Most of what he's written in Star Trek is pretty damn good. His Sung Androids trilogy is great. The Cold Equations. I don't know what the trilogy, what does he call it? I love his Star Trek writing, and I know it's got to be thrilling for him to work on the new Star Trek TV shows. I do, but man, can you imagine having to now reconcile all of that? He knows the Star Trek universe so well, what it's like to work on a show where he probably is thinking to himself, I won't mention it. I hope he can go back to writing his great Star Trek books, but they're great. We have all the ones he's written, and they're all great. So, Sister Harrow is here with a super chat. Well, thank you, Sister Harrow. I appreciate that. Every time I see your name, I want to sing your name like Sister Christian, and I think Boogie Nights when they sing that song in Boogie Nights. Richard says, "What are you leaning towards for the big guest star at the end of WandaVision? If Benedict Cumberbatch appears, I think it would be a disappointment, to be honest. Olsen says it's Luke level, and Bettany implies it's an incredible actor he's never acted with." My whole thing about any Avenger, including Doctor Strange, if they show up, it's to be expected. I don't know why the Avengers aren't there already. So I don't think that's a Luke Skywalker. The thing about the Luke Skywalker cameo at the end of Mandalorian was it was unexpected. We didn't know it was happening. I've heard theories. My favorite is Al Pacino playing Mephisto. Hoo-ah! I'm a fan of man. I'm a humanist. So I think it's gonna. And by the way, where it's 4:00. We are 7 hours and 55 minutes away from WandaVision. I can't wait. Tomorrow at this time, we'll know all about it. But you know what? I will not be talking about WandaVision tomorrow, because tomorrow the entire show is about the making of Dota Dragon's Blood. We have the entire creative team. We got a lot of the cast coming, including Yuri Lowenthal, who plays Davion the Dragon Knight. You can already see that on the thumbnail. Tomorrow's going to be an amazing, amazing show. Very, very cool show that only Robservations could bring you. Justin Jorgensen sends in a tip and says, I consider myself someone who's only about halfway through season 1 of The Next Generation. I consider myself a decent Trekkie. I love the lore and the entire premise of the show. That said, it makes a new fan like me sad where the franchise is going. Trek is become Hollywoodized. Damn. Well, Star Trek, to be fair, was always Hollywoodized, but it was Hollywoodized by people that really understood what it was they wanted to do. Star Trek is lacking a vision. You got Akiva Goldsman, who slaps his Oscar down on the table and says, "You have to do what I say." Or you have Michael Chabon, he's a novelist, going, "Here's my Pulitzer. That's you have to do what I say." And then you've got Alex Kurtzman saying, "I don't really know what to do. John Ottman, could you come here and work on the show and help me fix it for a while?" It's crazy. There's nobody with a vision of Star Trek. They've got their visions. This is the way I think it should be. What it needs is a Kevin Feige, somebody who knows Star Trek. Anthony Gonzalez says, "Hey, Robert, I think I like Star Trek 3 more than you do, but how is it that Chekhov has the self-destruct code? He wasn't even a member of the crew anymore. He was on his way home from duty on the Reliant, and had he been a hostage, I don't believe it. No, he might have, because he's a command-level officer, he might have found out that information. Off-screen. Maybe a Starfleet officer, when you come on board at his level, has to know the destruct code. That doesn't bother me." Richard says, "I agree with Simon. Despite its primordial science fiction nature, TOS definitely implied that the battles were fought at warp speed, and TNG screwed the pooch by making it look like ships were shooting at each other from 5 feet away while stationary." Look, I agree. I agree with that. I can't. The battles in Starfleet have always been strange. With Star Trek, they were never like right on top of each other. And I think, look, Next Generation was taking a cue from Star Trek 2, which is taking a cue from Star Wars. So yes. James Snyder says, "What did you think about updating the Star Trek animated series with modern animation but the original sound?" They were going to do that. CBS Digital actually did a test with Star Trek, with the animated series, where they took the original sound and they were going to update it. I had an idea that what I wanted to do, and I when we were working on the Next Generation Blu-rays, I wanted to give each episode of the animated series, 22 episodes, to a different animation company, different animation companies all over the world. European animators, Indian animators, Asian animators, and give them an episode and see what they would do with it. So you would put the original animated series on, but then you give them the audio tracks, and they could animate the episodes however they wanted. That's what I wanted to do, and they unfortunately didn't do that. 501 sends in a super chat and says, "V'ger found Cybertron, a race of sentient machines. I've always loved that idea, and for me, that's what happened. Live long and prosper." Or they found the Borg homeworld. But I like that, Cybertron. Well, they did a Transformers Star Trek crossover that IDW published, which I haven't read, but I think it would be cool. So that could happen. Hey, why not? 487 Sean Tower sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, Sean. "I cannot write. I have trouble with letters since I took a grenade to the head in the military, and it tore out my right eardrum, and I miss writing letters. I have to concentrate too much. You are gifted, and we need your voice." Well, 487 Sean Tower, let me just say, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that happen to you, but I appreciate that you followed in the footsteps of many great men and women and worked in our nation's military for the safety and the rights that this country enjoys, and I thank you for your service. And thank you very much for reaching out and being a part of the community. You are always welcome here, sir, and also thank you for supporting the channel in the way that you have. And you know what? I understood what you wrote, and I think you should keep up with it. And you're always welcome here, sir. And wow, I can't imagine what it was like. By the way, one of my best friends in the world is an 18 Delta. He is Green Beret, and he and I did a medical. He does a medical lecture series about surviving active violent events. So I've been blessed to work with him, and many of the people we work with are either currently in the military or ex-military, and it's been really a gratifying experience in my life. And we do what's called crisis medicine. Bronx Thrash sends in a super chat and says, I was wondering, why hasn't there been a Dick Tracy show or The Phantom? What about The Shadow? I like noir-based heroes. I would like to see a Rocketeer Disney series. I think they were going to do one. I really wanted to see one. I don't know. You know, I agree with you. The pulp heroes can be great. I kind of even like that Billy Zane Phantom movie. And The Shadow was pretty cool. And the what is it? The Spirit? Was it The Saint? Was The Saint with Val Kilmer? You know, although that was a TV series. But yeah, I think the pulp heroes, like, I don't know, The Shadow knows. Why not bring that back? Of course, the problem is, do you update those characters to the modern day, or do you do a period piece, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark version? I think, you know, when they tried to do that with those characters, I don't know if it worked out so well. Yeah. Limac Ajaz, if I'm getting that right, says, For All Mankind is the original series prequel the TOS prequel Enterprise should have been. Ron Moore is the rightful heir of Trek. I'll wait for his return. I have to tell you, Limac, in my mind, For All Mankind is, in fact, a Star Trek prequel. I've incorporated it into my head canon, and I think For All Mankind is a Star Trek prequel. I love the first episode of the second season. I really like that. A DKG Custom is here and says, a response to yesterday's Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival Super Chat. Yippee! Look, I take full responsibility for being inundated with work and slowing down. But, yeah. Elio Petri, that's who directed it. Yes. Paul J. Lewis sends in a Super Chat and says, the 10th victim. By the way, DKG Custom, it'll be worth the wait, I promise. Paul Lewis says the 10th victim was directed by Elio Petri, yes, who directed Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. Elio Petri is a great director. As a matter of fact, the Criterion put out Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion on Blu-ray, and there's a great documentary about Elio Petri on that disc. And he directed the 10th victim. If you guys like science fiction and you like mod, if you like 60s mod, you got to watch the 10th victim. The music alone is worth watching. As a matter of fact, you know, I wanted to play the I don't have much time because I have to go on another podcast at 4:30. Soundtrack. If you guys haven't ever heard of the 10th victim or seen the 10th victim, there's a song called, it's by Piero Piccioni, and there's a song called Spiral Waltz. And let's play it. I wonder if I can play this and you can hear it, because it's worth playing. It's so rad. I think you'll be able to hear it. No, I gotta put the output here. I'm gonna play it just because if you haven't seen the 10th victim, this piece of music. Oh, see, I can't play that. That's an ad. That's not what I want you to hear. Oh, wait, I gotta let it play first. WandaVision has arrived. Oh, there it goes. It's demonetized. Yeah, listen to this. This is wild. This music is wild. Or wait a second. Hang on. Yeah, shit. So if you guys haven't seen the 10th victim, I'm telling you, if that didn't convince you to watch it, I don't know what will. Watch, I probably just got demonetized. And for you guys at home, it sounded like blah, blah, blah. But look it up. Look up the 10th victim soundtrack. Because it's worth doing. It's worth seeing. Carlos Fontes sends in a super chat and says, how would you feel about a Star Wars Episode 10, Leave It Be or Explore Rey in a post-First Order galaxy? You know, I have no interest in that. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's nothing. I was not interested. I was not interested in anything that really happened in Rise of Skywalker. I'm watching a bunch of idiots running around doing idiotic things that they had no agency. They just kind of ran around and whatever happened to them. So yeah, not a fan. So, Richard said, at the very least, Alex Kurtzman can look like he's enjoying destroying Trek, not look half annoyed all the time and channeling Napoleon Dynamite. He kind of does look that way. Like, how can you not be having fun? Well, apparently you cannot be having fun. I don't really understand it, but what can you do? But that's funny. So Richard, Carlos Fontes says, speaking of Trek, I like Into Darkness that Chekhov was working in engineering during the Khan threat since Chekhov wasn't in Space Seed. Chekhov wasn't in Space Scene, but that doesn't mean he wasn't on the Enterprise. I mean, the thing is, remember, Khan is smart. He read the Enterprise manuals. He probably read and memorized who every single person on. When Khan says, "I never forget a face," it's because he was looking at Chekhov's dossier that was in the computer. He knew the faces of every single person on the Enterprise. So Chekhov wasn't part of the bridge crew, and Chekhov wasn't part of the command crew, so we just never saw Chekhov. He was one of the 400 other people working on the Enterprise that we never saw. So there you go. And I understand it, because people always said, well, but to me, I'm like, I never forget a face. He doesn't say he never forget a face because he met Chekhov. He says he never forgets a face because he was rifling through. Kirk let him read all the instruction manuals of the Enterprise. That's how he knew who everybody was. Kevin Ian Common says, my dad was 10 when Star Trek premiered. He's been a fan ever since. He quit Discovery and Picard because he felt they weren't made for him. My heart broke. If Star Trek isn't made for him, then who? Goddamn right, Kevin. I love your father. You give him my very best because he knows. The thing is, I don't think Star Trek Discovery and Picard were made for anybody specifically. They tried to serve a bunch of different masters, and I don't know. Richard says, I've never watched your physical media shows. Seems like an unnecessary expense. However, it occurred to me the other day that series I remember I will never watch again because our massive streaming libraries are still curated to some degree. I know, man. I know, Richard. I collect physical media to get things that I can't ever get otherwise. We got to have those things. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, I just saw Godfather 3 Coda. Not bad, just curious. What do you prefer, Boardwalk Empire or The Sopranos? Ooh. You know what? I think this might be sacrilegious to say, but to me, The Sopranos was a one-season show. It was Uncle June, and it was Livia and Tony Soprano. And once it was a perfect season of television. That first season of The Sopranos was incredible. And once Nancy Marchand died in this midway through the second season or whatever, shooting it, I thought it lost something. And then it was a good show. Loved it. But what the show is really about, the mother, Uncle June, and Tony, and the push and pull between the three of them, that was what the show was. And that's why the first season is so fucking good. It's one of my favorite first seasons of any television ever. But in terms of an evocation of the period, I think Boardwalk Empire was a more satisfying show throughout, if that makes any sense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle being, kind souls, however you identify, across these 28 known galaxies, I am going to say goodbye to all of you now because I'm going on to another stream, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You can follow me over there too. If you want. It's another stream that I'm going on to another channel, and I'm going to grab the actual link to our, let's see, where is it? Let me find it, and I'm going to send in the actual, I don't know where it is. I don't know where, it must be on YouTube. But it's the 4Nerds, hashtag 4Nerds, NIMW. But it's the 4Nerds podcast. Let me see if I can find it on YouTube. And then I will put it in the live chat. So you can all just come over and join the party over there. And I will look it up because I'm sure. We'll see if it's there. Yes. 4Nerds live. Let me look. The show's about to begin. I guess it would be. We'll see. It doesn't list me. Maybe I don't want to send you somewhere different, but it's episode 34, Den of Nerds. I think that's where I'm going. But it doesn't have my name on it, so I can't tell you for sure. But it is going to start soon. We shall see. But here we go. I think that's where I'm going. But on another note, I will bring this episode to an end. Robservations episode number... wait, there's music playing. Maybe it's not here. But maybe that was the wrong podcast. Don't go to that one. I'm not sure because I'm not there yet. But I'm going to bring the show to an end. I'm all discombobulated now. You can find me tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big day. This show begins at noon, and we are looking into the making of Dota Dragon's Blood. I will have series creator Ashley Edward Miller on again. He wrote, of course, Agent Cody Banks. He co-wrote X-Men First Class and Thor, and he was a producer on Fringe and Black Sails and Lore on Amazon, or on Netflix, or on Amazon. And now we have Dota Dragon's Blood, and I'm going to have supervising producer Steve Melching on, and also a number of the voice cast. It's going to be a bang-up time tomorrow at noon. Noon, ladies and gentlemen, noon. The show is still up, or already up, so you can look, and it will be fun. So I will see you all then. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Joshua Levesque, Justin Toner. I don't know who else is here. Greg Smith is here. Hello, Greg. Good to see you again. But my Purple Valkyrie is here. Thank you for moderating, Purple Valkyrie. That's very nice of you. I have a great moderating staff. I want to thank all my moderators. And, yeah. And if you want to go see anybody, the Richard is always over on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. We have the Whining About Movies Facebook page, the Fully Articulated Facebook page, and, of course, the Let's Get Physical Media Facebook page. You can go over there. If you want to send me a letter, go to my website, theburnettwork.net. Send me letters. I'll read them on the air. You can make fun of me. You can tell me I'm great. You can tell me you hate me. I'll still read the letters. Let's talk about it. Everyone's welcome. You're all Imagination Connoisseurs here. And obviously, we're going to have another member conversation for members of the channel on Saturday, Spoiler Saturday, talking about WandaVision. I won't be talking about WandaVision tomorrow because we're doing our special Dota show, the making of Dota. So that should be fun. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via tips, super chats, and, of course, letters, which have become, you guys are the best. The people that write in letters to me, the discourse, you keep that discourse elevated, which I very much appreciate, and I think all of our listeners do too. We passed 36,000 subscribers today. That was pretty nice, so thank you very much for that. And our viewers, we've had a lot of new subscribers over the last 2 months, which is fantastic, so thank you there. And it's great to have you all. And on that note, I'm now going to go on to another podcast. So I will see you all later. I will not be on the John Campea show tomorrow. I forgot to tell John that, though. I've got to call him and tell him. So, John, if you're watching, or if someone else, I'll call you and tell you I can't be on tomorrow's show because I'm dealing with our show that starts at noon. And on that note, I will say, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I end by saying, have a better day. And I mean that.